I lay motionless on my bedroom floor, thick smoke choking my lungs as flames crept under the door. My own son Marcus had just screamed those venomous words before striking that match and turning the deadbolt. The roar of his pickup truck fading into the distance should have been my death sentence. But beneath my nightdress pressed against my chest lay the secret that would destroy him. The hidden recording device had captured every word of his confession. When he returned in 2 hours with his crocodile tears and fabricated story, he would discover that his mother, Suzanne, was very much alive. Let me tell you how I became the target of my own son's murderous greed. My name is Suzanne Miller, and at 72 years old, I thought I understood the meaning of unconditional love. For 45 years, I devoted every breath in my body to my family, especially to Marcus, my only child. I live in a modest 2-story farmhouse nestled in the rolling hills of rural Kentucky. The property spans 12 acres of fertile land that my late husband Robert inherited from his grandfather. What started as a simple family home has become quite valuable over the years. Recent development in our county has made our land worth approximately $800,000, though I never paid much attention to such things until recently. Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack when Marcus was only 12 years old. One moment he was fixing the fence behind our barn, and the next moment I was calling 911 while our son watched his daddy slip away. That devastating September afternoon changed everything. I became a widow and a single mother in the span of 30 minutes. The years that followed were the hardest of my life. I worked double shifts at Henderson Textiles, the local factory, where I operated sewing machines for nearly 3 decades. My hands would ache by evening, fingers stiff from guiding fabric through those relentless machines hour after hour. But Marcus needed school clothes, college prep classes, and all the opportunities I never had growing up poor in eastern Kentucky. I sacrificed everything for that boy. When my coworkers went out for drinks after late shifts, I hurried home to help with homework. When my church group organized weekend trips or social events, I stayed home to cook Marcus his favorite meals and wash his football uniforms. Several good men asked me to dinner over the years, kind widowers, who might have brought companionship and stability to our home. I declined every invitation. Marcus needed my full attention, or so I believed. When Marcus graduated high school, I cashed in my retirement savings to send him to Western Kentucky University. He studied construction management while I continued working overtime to pay his tuition room and board. I was so proud when he walked across that graduation stage, the first person in our family to earn a college degree. Marcus married his college sweetheart Jennifer right after graduation. They seemed happy initially building a life together in Bowling Green, where Marcus found work with a commercial construction company. I thought my sacrifices had finally paid off when they blessed me with 2 beautiful grandchildren, Emma and Tyler. But their marriage began crumbling after 8 years. Marcus started drinking heavily, missing work, and according to Jennifer, he became verbally aggressive when stressed. The divorce was finalized 3 years ago, with Jennifer getting primary custody and Marcus receiving weekend visitation rights. That's when my son came home to roost broken and bitter at 38 years old. He moved into our guest bedroom claiming he needed time to get back on his feet. I welcomed him with open arms just like I always had. I converted the sunroom into bedrooms for Emma and Tyler during their weekend visits. Those children became the light of my life, especially after losing so many years with them during the marriage. I cooked elaborate Sunday dinners every weekend when the kids visited. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans fresh from my garden, and homemade biscuits that Tyler loved to smother in honey butter. Emma would help me bake chocolate chip cookies, while Tyler played with the collection of toy trucks I kept specifically for his visits. Marcus lost his construction job 6 months ago when his company downsized. The economy hit our area hard, and work became scarce. I understood his frustration, so I began helping with his expenses. His truck payment of $428 monthly, his car insurance, his child support payments to Jennifer. I figured it was temporary just until he found new employment. But something felt different about Marcus during these past months. He started asking strange questions about my financial affairs, questions about my will, my life insurance policy, and whether I had considered what would happen to the property if something happened to me. When I mentioned feeling forgetful sometimes, he would nod seriously and suggest that maybe I was developing memory problems. Then he started bringing around his new girlfriend, Crystal Manning. She's a real estate agent from Elizabethtown, 32 years old, with bleached blonde hair and a calculating smile that never quite reaches her eyes. Crystal would walk through my house during her visits, making comments about the original hardwood floors, the crown molding, and the large windows that flood the rooms with natural light. I noticed Crystal taking photographs with her phone during one visit. When I asked about it, she claimed she was capturing memories of Marcus's childhood home. But something about her explanation felt rehearsed, like she had practiced that response. Last week, I overheard Marcus talking on his phone in the garage while working on his truck. I had gone outside to bring him a glass of sweet tea when I heard him say words that froze my blood. "Don't worry, baby. Once the old lady's gone, we'll sell this place and move to Florida. The insurance money alone will set us up for life. Crystal, you've already done the market analysis. This property will bring us at least $800,000, maybe more with the right buyer." I stepped backward quietly, my heart pounding as the glass of tea slipped from my trembling hands and shattered on the concrete. Marcus didn't notice the sound over his conversation, but I heard every word as he continued. "I know it seems heartless, but she's had a good run. 72 years is longer than most people get. And honestly, she's been talking about joining Daddy in heaven lately. Maybe we'd just be helping her along." I made it back to the house on unsteady legs, my mind reeling from what I had just discovered. My son, the child I had sacrificed everything to raise and support, was planning my death. After overhearing that horrific conversation, I couldn't eat or sleep properly for days. But instead of confronting Marcus directly, something inside me insisted on learning the full scope of his betrayal. I began paying attention to details I had previously ignored, and what I discovered made me physically sick. I started by examining my financial records more carefully. For months, I had been signing papers that Marcus brought to me, trusting his explanations about insurance updates or bank account modifications. I requested copies of all my statements from Citizens Bank, where I had maintained accounts for over 20 years. The truth was devastating. Marcus had been systematically draining my accounts for the past 4 months. $67,000 had disappeared through a series of withdrawals and transfers that I never authorized. My savings account, which had contained nearly $90,000 from Robert's life insurance and my years of factory work, had been reduced to less than $23,000. But the financial theft was only the beginning. I discovered that Marcus had been in contact with my insurance agent, Bradley Thompson, asking detailed questions about my life insurance policy. The original policy of $200,000 had somehow been increased to $500,000 with the beneficiary changed from a split between Marcus and 3 local charities to Marcus alone. When I called Bradley directly, he seemed confused by my questions. He explained that Marcus had brought signed forms requesting these changes, claiming I was becoming forgetful, and had asked him to handle such matters. Bradley had even noted in his file that Marcus mentioned I was showing early signs of dementia and might need assistance with financial decisions. The word dementia hit me like a physical blow. I realized Marcus had been building a narrative about my mental decline for months. He had been telling neighbors, my insurance agent, and probably others that his poor mother was losing her faculties and needed his protection. I decided to test this theory by visiting my neighbor Harold Peterson, who lives in the farmhouse closest to ours, about a quarter-mile down the gravel road. Harold is 81 years old, a retired mechanic who has been my friend since Robert and I moved to this property 35 years ago. Harold's reaction confirmed my worst fears. He mentioned that Marcus had stopped by several times recently expressing concern about my safety living alone. Marcus had told Harold that I was becoming confused sometimes, forgetting to turn off appliances or lock doors. He had even suggested that I might need to be placed in an assisted living facility soon for my own protection. I was mortified. Harold admitted he had been watching my house more closely lately, worried about my well-being based on Marcus's reports. Other neighbors had apparently received similar warnings about my declining mental state. The next discovery came when I decided to investigate Crystal's involvement more thoroughly. I called the real estate office where she works, pretending to be interested in selling property. The receptionist mentioned that Crystal had recently been asking questions about rural properties in our area, specifically about land values and development potential. During one of Crystal's visits to my home, I pretended to nap in my recliner while listening to her conversation with Marcus in the kitchen. What I heard made my stomach turn. "Marcus, honey, we need to speed this up," Crystal said in a voice much different from the sweet tone she used when addressing me directly. "I've got buyers interested in this type of property, but the market won't stay hot forever. How much longer do you think it will take?" "I'm working on it," Marcus replied. "The old woman is tougher than she looks, but I've been adding the pills to her evening tea for 3 weeks now. She's getting more confused and sleepy. The neighbors have all noticed the change." Pills. My evening tea. Suddenly, the drowsiness and confusion I had been experiencing made perfect sense. Marcus had been drugging me, making me appear mentally impaired to support his narrative about my declining health. I forced myself to remain motionless in that chair, breathing slowly and evenly while they continued their conversation. Crystal mentioned something about accidents happening to elderly people all the time, especially those living alone in old houses with outdated electrical systems. "Fire investigators don't look too closely when it's an obvious accident," she said matter-of-factly, "especially when everyone knows the victim was getting forgetful about things like turning off appliances. They were planning to murder me and make it look like an accident. The insurance money combined with the sale of my property would fund their new life together in Florida. They had calculated my worth down to the last dollar and apparently decided I was worth more dead than alive." That evening, I flushed my tea down the sink drain when Marcus wasn't looking and filled the cup with water instead. I needed my mind clear to figure out how to protect myself from my own son's murderous intentions. I also made a disturbing discovery about how Marcus had been manipulating his own children. During their next weekend visit, I listened more carefully to their conversations and asked gentle questions about their father. Emma, who had always been affectionate and chatty with me, seemed more distant than usual. When I asked if anything was troubling her, she hesitated before saying that her daddy had explained how Grandma was getting sick and might not remember things clearly anymore. Tyler's sweet 11-year-old Tyler asked me directly if I was going to heaven soon like Granddaddy did. When I asked why he would wonder about such a thing, he explained that Daddy had been talking about how Grandma was very old and might need to go live with Jesus. Marcus had been preparing his own children for my death, planting seeds, so they wouldn't be completely shocked when their grandmother died suddenly. The coldness of this calculation took my breath away. Later that weekend, I found paperwork in Marcus's room while he was outside with the children. Hidden in his dresser drawer was a notebook containing what could only be described as a murder plan. The pages detailed my daily routine, noted when I was typically alone in the house, and outlined several scenarios for staging an accidental death. One page was titled House Fire Electrical and contained a detailed timeline. Marcus had researched how long it would take for a fire to spread through our old house, identified the best locations to start a blaze that would appear accidental, and even noted that our smoke detectors hadn't been tested recently. Another page discussed the timing of his alibi. He planned to take the children camping on a weekend when Jennifer had other plans, giving him a reason to leave the house, but also to return unexpectedly to discover the tragic accident. The most chilling entry was dated for the upcoming Friday night. Target date: kids away camping, return home to check on M, discover electrical fire, call 911, too late to save her. Marcus was planning to kill me in less than 1 week. Sitting in my kitchen that Sunday evening after discovering Marcus's murder plan, I experienced what I can only describe as a complete transformation. For the first time in my 72 years, I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a survivor. I had spent my entire adult life making excuses for Marcus's behavior, covering for his failures, and sacrificing my own needs to support his dreams. Even during his marriage troubles, I had defended him to Jennifer, insisting that he was just going through a difficult time. I realized that my unconditional support had enabled him to become the monster sitting in my living room, planning my death while eating the dinner I had prepared for him. But that night, the tears stopped flowing. The fear transformed into something much more powerful: strategic determination. If Marcus wanted to play a deadly game, I would show him that his mother was far from the helpless old woman he believed me to be. My first priority was gathering evidence that could protect me and ensure Marcus faced consequences for his actions. I drove to the electronics store in Elizabethtown the next morning, telling Marcus I needed to run errands. At Best Buy, I purchased a small digital voice recorder that the sales clerk assured me could capture clear audio for up to 12 hours on a single charge. Learning to operate the device took some practice, but I was more motivated than I had been about anything in years. I practiced hiding it beneath my clothing and activating it discreetly. The recorder was small enough to conceal under my nightgown or beneath a loose-fitting blouse without creating an obvious bulge. Over the next 3 days, I began documenting Marcus's criminal activities. I recorded his phone conversations with Crystal when they thought I was napping or outside in my garden. I captured his lies to neighbors about my mental state. Most importantly, I recorded him discussing the insurance money and property sale, as if my death was already a foregone conclusion. The recordings were damning. Marcus's voice clearly detailing how the insurance payout would fund their move to Florida. Crystal discussing market values and potential buyers for my property. Both of them laughing about how easy it had been to convince everyone that I was becoming senile. I also began gathering documentary evidence of Marcus's theft. I photographed bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals. I copied the forged signatures on documents I had never signed. I documented every instance where my name had been used without my permission. But I knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed allies, people who could support my version of events when the time came to expose Marcus's plan. I started by reaching out to people I had trusted for years, but had neglected during my decades of single-minded focus on my son. My sister Patricia lives in Sacramento, California, where she retired after 30 years as a high school principal. Patricia and I had grown apart over the years, mainly because I was always too busy with Marcus's needs to maintain our relationship properly. But when I called her and explained what I had discovered, she was on the next flight to Kentucky. Patricia arrived with a sharp legal mind and zero tolerance for Marcus's manipulation. She had never liked his entitled attitude even as a child, and had often warned me that I was spoiling him. Now she was determined to help me fight back. I also confided in Harold Peterson, my neighbor, who had been unwittingly supporting Marcus's lies about my mental decline. Harold was mortified when he learned the truth and immediately offered to help in any way possible. As a retired mechanic who had served in Vietnam, Harold understood both strategy and loyalty. The most important ally I recruited was William Baker, who had been Robert's best friend and partner in their small auto repair business before Robert's death. William was a retired police officer who understood criminal investigation and legal procedures. When I explained Marcus's plan, William's face hardened with the same expression I remembered from his law enforcement days. William helped me understand the legal implications of what Marcus was planning. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, elder abuse theft, and conspiracy charges would likely send Marcus to prison for decades if we could prove our case convincingly. But William also warned me about the danger I was facing. Marcus had already demonstrated his willingness to drug me and steal from me. If he suspected that I knew about his plan, he might accelerate his timeline or choose a more direct method of murder. We developed a careful strategy for my protection. Patricia would stay at the local bed and breakfast close enough to help, but not so close that Marcus would become suspicious. Harold would monitor my house from his property and call for help if anything seemed wrong. William would coordinate with his former colleagues in law enforcement to ensure rapid response when the time came. The hardest part was continuing to act like the confused, helpless woman Marcus believed me to be. I had to pretend the sleeping pills were still affecting me, acting drowsy and disoriented when he was present. I had to let him continue stealing from my accounts while I secretly protected the bulk of my assets by transferring them to new accounts at a different bank. I also had to endure his fake concern and condescending treatment. Marcus would pat my shoulder and speak to me like a child, expressing worry about my forgetfulness and suggesting that maybe I should consider moving to a safer environment, all while planning to murder me within days. During this time, I learned that Marcus had been researching my prescription medications, apparently looking for ways to make my death appear natural. He had been in contact with my doctor's office, claiming concern about potential drug interactions or overdose risks. The cold calculation behind every aspect of his plan was breathtaking. I also discovered that Marcus had been meeting regularly with a lawyer about estate proceedings, asking hypothetical questions about probate processes and inheritance timelines. He wanted to ensure he could access my assets quickly after my death, without legal complications or delays. Crystal's role became even clearer during this investigation period. She had been scouting potential buyers for my property, including developers interested in subdividing the land for residential construction. She had prepared market analyses and listing proposals ready to move forward immediately after my death. By Thursday night, I had everything in place. The recording device was fully charged and tested. My allies were positioned and ready. My financial assets were protected. Most importantly, I had transformed from Marcus's victim into his opponent. I spent that evening pretending to drink my drug tea while Marcus watched television in the living room. But instead of becoming drowsy and confused, I was alert and prepared for the fight of my life. Tomorrow night, Marcus would attempt to murder his mother. Instead, he would discover that Suzanne Miller was much stronger, smarter, and more determined than he had ever imagined. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that had always been my favorite. The maple trees surrounding my house blazed with red and gold leaves, and the afternoon sunshine felt warm against my face as I worked in my garden. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a perfect day. Instead, I was preparing for my son to attempt murder. Marcus had left early that morning, supposedly to take Emma and Tyler camping at Rough River Lake. He kissed my forehead before leaving, telling me he would return that evening to check on me before rejoining the children at their campsite. The tenderness in his voice made my skin crawl, knowing it was all performance. I spent the day making final preparations. Patricia called from her room at the Rosewood Inn to confirm she was ready. Harold tested our communication system by calling my phone from his house. William reviewed the emergency response plan one more time, ensuring that law enforcement would be standing by without being obviously present. The recording device was fully charged and hidden beneath my nightgown, positioned over my heart, where it would capture audio clearly even if I was lying down. I had practiced activating it quickly and discreetly dozens of times. As evening approached, I positioned myself in my bedroom according to our plan. I arranged pillows and blankets to suggest I had been resting. I placed a glass of water on my nightstand, along with the prescription bottle that Marcus had been tampering with. Everything needed to support the narrative of a confused elderly woman who had accidentally overdosed or fallen. Marcus arrived home just after 8:30, exactly as he had indicated in his notebook. I heard his truck pull into our gravel driveway, the engine shutting off with a familiar rumble. His footsteps approached the front door, and I activated the recording device as he entered the house. "Mom!" he called out, his voice carrying artificial concern. "I'm back from dropping the kids off. Just wanted to make sure you're okay before I head back to the campsite." I didn't respond immediately, letting him think I was either asleep or disoriented from the medications. His footsteps moved through the house, checking the kitchen and living room before approaching my bedroom. I had positioned myself on the floor near my bed, making it appear that I had fallen and couldn't get up. My nightgown was disheveled, and I let my hair fall across my face to obscure my expression. To anyone entering the room, I would look like an elderly woman who had collapsed and was barely conscious. Marcus knocked softly on my bedroom door before pushing it open. "Mom, are you all right in there?" I made a soft groaning sound as if I was struggling to stay awake. Through half-closed eyes, I watched Marcus enter the room and assess the situation. His expression shifted from fake concern to something much colder as he realized I appeared to be incapacitated. "Perfect," he muttered under his breath, apparently believing I was too far gone to understand what was happening. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call that the recording device captured perfectly. "Crystal, it's time. She's out cold just like we planned. The pills finally did their job." I listened to Crystal's voice through the phone speaker as she responded. "Are you sure she won't wake up?" "We can't afford any mistakes. Trust me, she's completely gone. I've been increasing the dose for the past week. She probably doesn't even know where she is right now." Marcus began moving around the room, and I heard him unplugging electrical devices and moving furniture. He was setting the stage for an electrical fire, just as his notebook had outlined. "You know what, Mom?" Marcus said, apparently addressing my motionless form. "I should probably explain what's about to happen since you're too drugged to understand anyway." What followed was the most chilling confession I had ever heard. Marcus described years of resentment about the sacrifices I had made for him, claiming they had made him feel guilty and inadequate. He blamed me for his failed marriage, his financial problems, and his inability to succeed in life. "Jennifer was right about one thing," he said while continuing his fire preparations. "You did spoil me, but not in a good way. You made me feel like I could never live up to your expectations, like I was always disappointing you even when you pretended everything was fine." He described how he had met Crystal and realized that my property was his ticket to a better life. They had calculated that the insurance money and land sale would provide enough capital to start fresh in Florida, where Crystal had connections in the real estate industry. "You've had a good run, Mom. 72 years is longer than a lot of people get. And honestly, you've been talking about missing Dad and wanting to join him in heaven. Maybe I'm just helping you get what you want." The recording device captured every word as Marcus continued his preparations. He overloaded electrical outlets with multiple devices, positioned a space heater dangerously close to my bedroom curtains, and disabled the smoke detector by removing its battery. "The best part is that everyone will believe it was an accident," Marcus continued. "Poor old Suzanne getting confused and leaving appliances running. The neighbors have all been worried about her mental state lately. Such a tragedy, but at least she didn't suffer." When Marcus was satisfied with his fire setup, he made another phone call to Crystal. "Everything's ready. I'll start the fire and head back to the campsite. We'll give it about 2 hours for the fire to do its work. Then I'll come back with the kids acting worried because I couldn't reach her by phone." I heard Crystal's response clearly. "What about the children? Won't they be traumatized?" "They'll get over it. Kids are resilient. Besides, they'll be so much better off with the inheritance money funding their college education and future. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." The casual way they discussed traumatizing Emma and Tyler made me want to leap up and attack Marcus with my bare hands. But I forced myself to remain motionless, knowing that the recording of this conversation would be crucial evidence. Marcus approached my apparently unconscious form and knelt down beside me. For a moment, I thought he might check my pulse or breathing, which would have revealed that I was fully alert. Instead, he simply stared at me with an expression of cold calculation. "You know what the funny thing is, Mom? I actually thought about just smothering you with a pillow. It would be quicker and cleaner. But the fire gives me a better alibi and makes the insurance investigation less likely." He stood up and moved toward the door, then turned back for what he apparently intended to be his final words to his mother. "Goodbye, Mom. Try not to suffer too much." Marcus struck a match and held it to the curtains near the overloaded electrical outlet. The fabric caught fire, immediately flames spreading quickly up toward the ceiling. He watched for a moment to ensure the fire was spreading properly, then headed for the door. Just before leaving, Marcus delivered the words that would haunt him forever. "You'll burn with this house, you miserable old woman." I heard him lock the bedroom door from the outside, sealing me inside with the growing fire. His footsteps moved quickly through the house, and within minutes I heard his truck starting up and driving away. The moment his truck disappeared down our gravel road, I sprang into action. The fire was spreading rapidly, but I had prepared for this moment. I rushed to the bedroom window that I had unlocked earlier that day and pushed it open. The ladder I had positioned outside was exactly where Harold had placed it that afternoon. I climbed through the window and down the ladder, my 72-year-old body moving with adrenaline-fueled strength I hadn't felt in years. Within minutes, I was safely on the ground and running toward Harold's property, where we had arranged for me to hide and observe. From Harold's barn, I watched smoke beginning to pour from my bedroom window. The fire was growing quickly, just as Marcus had planned. In exactly 2 hours, he would return with Emma and Tyler, expecting to find my charred remains and a tragic accident that would make him a wealthy widower. Instead, he was about to discover that his mother was very much alive and had recorded every detail of his murder attempt. I waited in Harold's barn for exactly 1 hour and 57 minutes, watching smoke billow from my bedroom window, while my heart pounded with a mixture of fear and righteous anger. Harold had called the fire department as soon as I reached his property, but we had instructed them to respond slowly, giving Marcus time to return and incriminate himself further. The volunteer firefighters arrived just as Marcus's truck turned into our driveway. I watched through Harold's binoculars as my son parked and jumped out, apparently shocked to see emergency vehicles already on scene. He had clearly expected to be the one discovering the fire and calling for help. Marcus ran toward the firefighters with what appeared to be genuine panic, shouting about his mother being trapped inside the burning house. His acting was convincing enough to fool the emergency responders, who immediately began asking about my location and medical condition. "She's in the back bedroom," Marcus yelled, pointing toward the window where smoke was still pouring out. "She takes medication that makes her drowsy. She might not have heard the smoke alarms." The fire chief quickly organized his crew to search for me while others worked to contain the blaze. I watched Marcus pace frantically near his truck, occasionally pulling out his phone as if trying to call me. His performance was Oscar-worthy, complete with tears and desperate pleas for the firefighters to work faster. Within minutes, Crystal's car pulled up behind Marcus's truck. She jumped out and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as he sobbed into her neck. To any observer, they looked like a couple devastated by a family tragedy. "I should have stayed with her," Marcus wailed loud enough for everyone to hear. "I knew she was getting confused lately. I should have known something like this would happen." Crystal comforted him publicly while scanning the fire scene with calculating eyes. I could see her mentally assessing the damage and probably wondering if the fire had destroyed enough evidence to support their accidental death story. Emma and Tyler arrived 20 minutes later with Jennifer, who had apparently received an emergency call from Marcus about the fire. The children were hysterical, crying and asking repeatedly if Grandma Suzanne was safe. Their genuine terror and grief stood in stark contrast to their father's manufactured emotion. I watched 11-year-old Tyler bury his face in his mother's shoulder, his small body shaking with sobs. Emma kept asking the firefighters if they had found me, yet her voice breaking with each question. Marcus had been willing to traumatize his own children with my death for the sake of insurance money and property value. The fire chief emerged from the house after 30 minutes, his face grim as he approached Marcus. "Sir, we've searched the entire structure. There's no one inside." Marcus's expression shifted from grief to confusion in an instant. "What do you mean there's no one inside? She has to be in there. Where else would she be?" "The bedroom where the fire started is empty, sir. We found no evidence that anyone was present when the fire began." "Are you certain your mother was in the house?" I watched Marcus struggle to process this information. According to his timeline, I should have been unconscious from the sleeping pills and trapped in the locked bedroom. The fire should have killed me within the first 30 minutes, leaving remains that would support the accidental death narrative. "Check again," Marcus demanded. "Maybe she tried to escape and collapsed somewhere else in the house. She's 72 years old and takes strong medication. She couldn't have just disappeared." The firefighters conducted a second search while Marcus became increasingly agitated. He kept asking neighbors if anyone had seen me leave the house, his voice rising with each negative response. His carefully planned alibi was crumbling because the most important element, my death, had failed to occur. Crystal pulled Marcus aside for a whispered conversation that I couldn't hear from my hiding spot. Based on their body language, she was trying to calm him down while figuring out what had gone wrong with their murder plan. "Maybe she's hiding somewhere on the property," Crystal suggested loudly enough for others to hear. "Older people sometimes get confused and wander off when they're scared." This sparked a search of my 12-acre property with neighbors and emergency responders calling my name and checking every building. Marcus participated in the search, but I could see the panic growing in his eyes with each passing minute. Jennifer approached Marcus during the search, her expression suspicious. "Marcus, you said you left Mom alone to go back to the campsite, but Emma told me you never came back to camp after dropping them off. Where have you been for the past 2 hours?" Marcus fumbled for an explanation. "I stopped for gas and grabbed some supplies. Then I got worried about Mom and decided to check on her before heading back. I guess it's lucky I did, or no one would have discovered the fire until it was too late." But Jennifer wasn't convinced. As a nurse, she had developed good instincts about when people were lying about medical or safety issues. She continued asking pointed questions about Marcus's timeline while he became increasingly defensive. Harold emerged from his property at exactly the 2-hour mark, approaching the search party with apparent concern. "Has anyone found Suzanne? I saw smoke and called it in, but I haven't seen her since this morning." Marcus immediately focused on Harold, desperate for any information about my whereabouts. "Did you see her leave the house? Did anyone pick her up? Where could she have gone?" Harold shook his head sympathetically. "I wish I could help, son, but I've been worried about your mother lately. You mentioned she was having memory problems, and I've been keeping an eye out for anything unusual." I watched Marcus's face as Harold spoke. The mention of the memory problems that Marcus had fabricated seemed to remind him that his lies had created a web he couldn't escape. If I was wandering around confused, I might surface anywhere and contradict his story about the accidental fire. The fire chief called Marcus over for an official report about the incident. He asked detailed questions about the cause of the fire, my mental state, and the timeline of events. Marcus stuck to his story about electrical problems and his mother's confusion, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "We'll need to investigate the cause of this fire thoroughly," the fire chief explained. "There are some unusual aspects to the burn pattern that we'll want to examine more closely." Marcus's face went pale at the mention of an investigation. He began asking nervous questions about how long the investigation would take and whether the house was safe to enter. Just as Marcus seemed ready to completely lose control of the situation, William Baker arrived in his pickup truck. William parked near the emergency vehicles and approached the group with the calm confidence of a former law enforcement officer. "I heard about the fire on my police scanner," William announced. "Has anyone located Suzanne? I've been worried about her lately." Marcus spun toward William with desperate hope. "Bill, thank God you're here. Mom's missing and nobody knows where she went. The house caught fire and she just vanished." William listened to Marcus's explanation with the expressionless face he had perfected during 30 years of police work. When Marcus finished his story, William nodded slowly and pulled out his cell phone. "Well, Marcus, I think I can help solve this mystery. Suzanne is safe, and she's been in protective custody for the past several hours." The effect of William's words on Marcus was immediate and devastating. His face drained of all color, and he actually staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. "What do you mean, protective custody?" Crystal demanded, stepping forward aggressively. "Protective custody from what?" William smiled grimly as he answered. "Protective custody from her son, who has been planning to murder her for insurance money." The silence that followed William's announcement was deafening. Marcus stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, while Crystal's face went through a series of expressions ranging from shock to calculation to panic. "That's ridiculous," Crystal finally managed to say. "Marcus would never hurt his mother. They're very close. He's been taking care of her." William reached into his truck and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Actually, Ms. Manning, we have extensive evidence of Marcus's plan to murder Suzanne for financial gain, including audio recordings of his confession." I decided this was the perfect moment for my entrance. I stepped out from behind Harold's barn and walked steadily toward the group, my back straight and my voice clear. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "Surprised to see me alive?" The sound that came from Marcus's throat was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. He actually stumbled backward, grabbing Crystal's arm for support as his knees seemed to give out. Emma and Tyler screamed, "Grandma!" simultaneously and ran toward me. I caught them both in my arms, holding them tight while glaring at their father over their heads. The relief on their faces was heartbreaking, and I realized how much trauma Marcus had been willing to inflict on his own children. "Kids, I'm fine," I assured them. Grandma is safe and everything is going to be okay. Jennifer approached more slowly, her nurse's training evident as she looked me over for injuries. Suzanne, are you hurt? Where have you been? I've been hiding, Jennifer. Hiding from my son who tried to murder me tonight. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, what are you talking about? I've been worried sick about you. I thought you were trapped in the fire. The fire you set Marcus, after you locked me in the bedroom and told me I would burn with the house. William opened his folder and pulled out the small recording device. This device captured your entire confession, Marcus. Every word of your murder plan, every detail of how you've been stealing from your mother, and every cruel thing you said before you tried to burn her alive. Crystal made a sudden movement toward her car, but 2 police officers emerged from an unmarked vehicle parked nearby. They had been waiting for William's signal to make their arrests. Crystal Manning and Marcus Miller, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, arson, insurance fraud, and elder abuse, announced Detective Sarah Montgomery, whom William had worked with for years before his retirement. As the officers read them their rights, Marcus began babbling explanations and excuses. You don't understand, I wasn't really going to hurt her. It was just Crystal's idea. I was desperate. But Crystal remained silent, apparently realizing that anything she said would only make their situation worse. I pulled out my own folder, which contained copies of all the evidence I had gathered over the past week. Detective Montgomery, I have documentation of Marcus's theft from my bank accounts, the forged signatures on insurance documents, and records of how he's been drugging me with sleeping pills. Jennifer's face went white as she processed this information. Drugging you, Marcus? How could you do this to your own mother? And to your own children, I added. You were willing to traumatize Emma and Tyler by making them believe their grandmother had died in a house fire. All for insurance money and property value. Emma looked up at me with confusion. Daddy said you were getting sick and might have to go live with Grandpa in heaven. Your daddy lied to you, sweetheart. I'm healthy and strong, and I'm going to be around for a long time. The evidence against Marcus and Crystal was overwhelming. Detective Montgomery examined the financial documents showing Marcus's systematic theft of $67,000 from my accounts. The insurance paperwork revealed how they had increased my life insurance to $500,000 and changed the beneficiary. But the recording was the most damaging evidence. Detective Montgomery played portions of it for the assembled group, including Marcus's detailed confession of his murder plan and his cold dismissal of how his children would be affected. The fire was supposed to look accidental, Marcus had said on the recording. Everyone knows she was getting confused about turning off appliances. William explained how we had coordinated the investigation with local law enforcement. Suzanne came to me 6 days ago with evidence that Marcus was planning to kill her. We've been building a case ever since. Marcus's former father-in-law, Robert's best friend, had turned against him completely. Marcus, I've known you since you were 12 years old. I watched Suzanne sacrifice everything to give you opportunities, and this is how you repay her. The neighbors who had gathered to help with the fire were horrified as they learned the truth. Several of them approached me to apologize for believing Marcus's lies about my mental decline. I'm so sorry, Suzanne, said Martha Evans, who lived about a mile down the road. Marcus seemed so concerned about you. We had no idea he was manipulating us. Harold stepped forward to provide his testimony. Marcus had me convinced that Suzanne was becoming unsafe living alone. He asked me to watch for signs that she was confused or dangerous to herself. Now I realize he was setting up his murder plot. The most damaging testimony came from Patricia, who had been documenting Marcus's behavior from her hotel room. I've been recording my brother-in-law's conversations with my sister for the past 3 days. He's been coaching her on how to act confused and helpless, obviously for practice. Detective Montgomery arrested both Marcus and Crystal on multiple felony charges. The evidence was so comprehensive that the district attorney would later describe it as one of the most clear-cut attempted murder cases he had ever prosecuted. As Marcus was placed in handcuffs, he made one last desperate plea. "Mom, please don't do this to me. I'm your son. I made a mistake, but we can work this out. You don't want to send your only child to prison?" I looked at him calmly and said the words I had been practicing for days. "Marcus, you stopped being my son the moment you decided my life was worth less than your bank account. A real son doesn't try to murder his mother for insurance money." Crystal remained silent as she was arrested, but her expression suggested she was already calculating legal strategies and plea bargains. Emma and Tyler watched their father being arrested with a mixture of confusion and terror. Jennifer knelt down to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms while I held their hands. "Your daddy made some very bad choices that hurt people," Jennifer told them. "He's going to have to face consequences for those choices, but you're safe, and Grandma Suzanne is safe, and we're going to take care of you." The children would need therapy to process their father's attempted murder of their beloved grandmother, but at least they would have the chance to heal and grow up with people who truly loved them. As the police cars drove away with Marcus and Crystal, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that I had survived, satisfaction that justice was being served, sadness for the son I had raised and lost, and determination to build a better life from the ashes of this betrayal. William put his arm around my shoulders as we watched the taillights disappear. "Suzanne, you showed more courage tonight than most police officers show in their entire careers. But I knew the hard work was just beginning. Marcus and Crystal would face trial, and I would need to rebuild my life and relationships after this devastating betrayal. At least now I could face that future as a survivor, not a victim." The trial of Marcus Miller and Crystal Manning became the most talked about case in our county's recent history. The local newspaper ran daily coverage, and the courthouse was packed with spectators who couldn't believe a man would try to murder his own mother for insurance money. Marcus and Crystal were tried separately, with Crystal's trial beginning first. The prosecution presented the audio recording as their primary evidence, playing Marcus's detailed confession of the murder plan for the jury. Several jurors wiped away tears as they heard him describe how he planned to traumatize his own children by staging my accidental death. Crystal's defense attorney tried to argue that she was merely Marcus's girlfriend who got caught up in his criminal scheme. But the evidence showed she had been actively researching my property value, preparing sales materials, and encouraging Marcus to speed up the process of my death. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Crystal guilty on all charges. She received a 15-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder insurance fraud and elder abuse. The judge noted that her calculated participation in planning an elderly woman's murder showed a complete lack of moral character. Marcus's trial began 3 weeks later. His defense attorney attempted an insanity plea, claiming that financial desperation had driven my son to temporary madness. But the audio recording proved that Marcus had planned my murder carefully over several months, systematically setting up the circumstances and building his alibi. The most powerful moment of the trial came when the prosecution played the recording of Marcus telling me I would "burn with this house, you miserable old woman." Several jury members audibly gasped, and I saw 2 women in the back row shaking their heads in disbelief. I testified for over 6 hours, describing years of sacrificing for Marcus and how he had repaid my love with theft, lies, and attempted murder. The defense attorney tried to portray me as a controlling mother who had driven Marcus to desperation, but my calm, factual testimony undermined their strategy. Emma and Tyler were spared from testifying, but Jennifer provided crucial evidence about Marcus's lies and manipulation. She described how he had been preparing the children for my death and had shown no genuine concern for their emotional well-being. The jury found Marcus guilty on all charges after deliberating for 2 days. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. At age 38, Marcus would be 53 years old before he could even apply for parole. During sentencing, the judge delivered a scathing condemnation of Marcus's actions. "Mr. Miller, you have committed one of the most heinous crimes imaginable, attempting to murder the woman who gave you life and sacrificed everything for your success. Your mother deserved your protection and care, not your betrayal and violence." Marcus showed no remorse during sentencing, instead blaming his actions on stress, financial pressure, and even my supposed controlling behavior. His complete lack of accountability convinced me that I had made the right choice in pursuing full prosecution. The financial recovery took several months, but eventually I reclaimed all of the money Marcus had stolen, plus additional damages awarded by the court. His truck and personal belongings were sold to pay restitution, though the monetary recovery meant less to me than the vindication of justice. The insurance investigation cleared me completely, and the company paid for the fire damage to my house. I decided to renovate extensively, turning my home into the sanctuary I had always dreamed of. New security systems, updated electrical and plumbing, and modern amenities while preserving the farmhouse character that Robert and I had loved. Emma and Tyler required significant therapy to process their father's actions, but they remained close to me throughout the healing process. Jennifer brought them for regular visits, and I established college funds for both children with money from the restitution and my careful savings over the years. The children slowly began to understand that their father had been lying to them about many things, not just about my supposed mental decline. Emma, now 15, wrote me a letter apologizing for believing her father's stories about me becoming confused and difficult. "I should have trusted you, Grandma," she wrote. "Daddy told us you were getting mean and selfish, but you were never anything but loving to us. I'm sorry I doubted you." Tyler, now 12, struggled more with anger toward his father. During one of our conversations, he asked me directly, "Grandma, why did Daddy want to hurt you? Didn't he know how much we love you?" I chose my words carefully, explaining that sometimes people make terrible choices when they focus more on money than on love. I assured Tyler that his father's actions were not his fault and that Marcus's crimes didn't reflect on him or Emma. My relationship with Patricia grew stronger than it had been in decades. She extended her visit to Kentucky for several months, helping me process the emotional trauma and rebuild my life. We took long walks around my property, talking through years of family dynamics that we had never discussed honestly before. "Suzanne, you enabled Marcus's selfish behavior for years," Patricia told me gently. "You made excuses for his failures and protected him from natural consequences. But that doesn't justify what he tried to do to you." I came to understand that my unconditional support had actually harmed Marcus by preventing him from developing genuine resilience and accountability. My sacrifices had created an entitled man who believed the world owed him success and comfort. Harold Peterson became one of my closest friends during the recovery period. We shared evening meals several times a week, and he helped with property maintenance and security improvements. Our friendship deepened into a comfortable companionship that brought joy to both of our lives. William Baker remained my trusted advisor and friend, helping me navigate legal matters and providing the kind of steady support I had never received from my own son. His law enforcement background made me feel safe and protected during the vulnerable months following the trial. I also became involved in elder abuse prevention advocacy, speaking at community groups about the warning signs of financial exploitation by family members. My story helped other elderly people recognize manipulation and protect themselves from similar schemes. The most difficult aspect of recovery was accepting that the son I had loved and sacrificed for never really existed. The Marcus I had raised was a fiction created by my own denial and his skillful manipulation. The real Marcus was someone willing to murder his mother for money and traumatize his children in the process. But gradually, I began to build a life based on my own needs and desires, rather than on serving others who didn't appreciate my sacrifices. I joined a book club, took pottery classes at the community center, and traveled to visit Patricia in California for the first time in 20 years. 2 years after the trial, I was gardening in my backyard when Emma and Tyler arrived for one of their regular visits. Tyler ran to me with excitement, announcing that he had made the honor roll at school. Emma showed me photographs from her high school drama club performance. "You know what Grandma Emma said as we sat on my porch swing that evening? I think we're all happier now than we were when Daddy was around. Is that terrible to say?" "No, sweetheart," I replied honestly. Sometimes removing toxic people from our lives, even family members, allows everyone to be healthier and happier. The children were thriving under Jennifer's stable parenting and my loving but appropriately boundaried support. They were learning to make good choices because they understood natural consequences, not because they were being enabled or protected from reality. Marcus wrote me letters from prison during his second year of incarceration, claiming to be sorry and asking for my forgiveness. I read each letter carefully before throwing it away unanswered. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't require maintaining relationships with people who have proven themselves dangerous. On the third anniversary of Marcus's attempt to murder me, I hosted a celebration dinner for all the people who had helped save my life and rebuild it afterward. Patricia, Harold, William, Jennifer, Emma, and Tyler gathered around my dining room table for the kind of meal I had once prepared only for people who took me for granted. As I looked around the table at faces filled with genuine love and appreciation, I realized that surviving Marcus's betrayal had given me something precious: the chance to build relationships based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided sacrifice. My story became a cautionary tale in our community about the dangers of enabling adult children and the importance of protecting elderly family members from exploitation. But for me, it was ultimately a story of transformation from victim to survivor. I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting abuse, theft, or attempted murder. Real love requires boundaries, accountability, and the courage to protect yourself from those who would exploit your affection. At 75 years old, I'm living the most authentic and joyful life I've ever experienced. I wake up each morning in my beautiful, secure home, surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide for them. Marcus will likely spend the next decade in prison, and I genuinely hope he uses that time to develop the character and accountability he never learned during his childhood. But whether he changes or not, I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on his choices. Sometimes the people we love the most turn out to be the ones most willing to destroy us. But surviving their betrayal can teach us to love ourselves enough to build something better from the ashes. If you've experienced manipulation or abuse from family members, especially adult children who exploit elderly parents, please know that you deserve better. Trust your instincts, protect your assets, and don't be afraid to set boundaries with people who treat your love as weakness. I'd love to hear your thoughts about family boundaries and protecting yourself from financial exploitation. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about toxic family relationships? How did you find the courage to put your own well-being first? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building stronger, healthier relationships. And please share this with anyone who might benefit from learning about the warning signs of elder abuse or the importance of setting boundaries with manipulative family members. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting survivors who choose to fight back against those who would exploit our love. Remember, you are stronger than you know, and you deserve relationships built on genuine respect and care. Until next time, protect yourselves and trust your instincts. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we most need protection from.